Picture this. Your sister-in-law is 7 months pregnant. She's glowing, knitting baby clothes, dreaming of a family she fought years to have. And your brother, your own blood, calls you at midnight, begging you to lie for him because he's with his ex. Would you protect him or would you protect her?
If you've ever wished karma would come faster for people who betray the ones they love the most, hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the moment when silence becomes complicity and how one choice changes everything.
It was just past midnight when my phone lit up. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Nobody in my family ever calls that late unless it's an emergency. I remember blinking at the glowing screen in the dark, my stomach tightening the second I saw the name, my brother, Daniel. For a split second, my heart dropped. Was my sister-in-law okay? Emily, Daniel's wife, was 7 months pregnant. Was she in labor early? Was something wrong with the baby? I picked up instantly. My voice was hoarse, half asleep, but my chest was already pounding. Hey, what's wrong? Is Emily okay? I whispered, swinging my legs out of bed, already bracing myself to grab my keys. But instead of panic about the baby, I heard something different. His voice was frantic, yes, but not the kind of frantic that comes with broken water or a rush to the ER. No, this was different. It was messy. It was guilty. I need you to do me a favor, Daniel said quickly. His words tumbled over each other, rushed, like he was trying to get them out before he lost the nerve. If Emily asks where I was tonight, just tell her I was at your place, okay? My body went cold. That one sentence, it was like a knife sliding between my ribs. I froze. Wait, what? Why? Where were you? There was this long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, heavy, uneven, the kind of breathing you do when you're trapped and scrambling for a way out. And then he said it. I was hanging out with an old friend. That phrasing, an old friend, made my stomach twist. I pressed harder. What old friend? Another pause, a sigh. And then flatly, like he'd accepted he couldn't keep it hidden anymore, my ex, Claire. I swear the room spun. I gripped the edge of the mattress to steady myself. Daniel, the one everyone praised for being the perfect husband, the one Emily trusted blindly, the one who had finally been blessed with a child after years of heartbreak, was sneaking around with his ex. And now he wanted me to lie for him? Are you out of your mind? My voice rose, sharp now. My whisper wasn't a whisper anymore. Emily is 7 months pregnant with your child. She trusts you completely. And you're asking me to cover for you? He groaned, frustrated, like I was the problem. Come on, don't make this a big deal. It was just a drink, just catching up. Don't ruin this for me. But all I could picture was Emily, sitting at home, swollen feet propped up, one hand on her stomach, while the other knitted tiny socks. I could see her smile, hear her laugh as she talked about names, about nursery colors, about how much she trusted Daniel to be a good father. And he was out there betraying her. I clenched my teeth. No, I'm not lying for you. Silence, and then his voice, low, dangerous, the kind he only used when he felt cornered. So that's it. You're choosing sides. You'd rather betray me than have my back. My blood boiled. I'm not betraying you. You're betraying her. Don't twist this. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The line felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. And then, just like that, the call ended.
I sat in the dark, staring at my phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was like waking up from a nightmare only to realize the nightmare was real. The weight of it crushed me. My brother had asked me to be part of his betrayal, and by saying no, I'd drawn a line in the sand. The next morning, I half expected him to call back, calmer, maybe even apologetic. But no, instead I got a single text. Don't bother talking to me until you learn what loyalty means. Loyalty. That word burned. Because loyalty, to me, meant protecting the innocent, not shielding the guilty. And just like that, the silent war had begun. I didn't say anything to Emily. I couldn't. My lips felt sewn shut by guilt and fear. But every time I saw her, every time she smiled, every time she mentioned how safe and loved she felt, my stomach churned because I knew and she didn't. And it wasn't just her I had to worry about. My mom called me later that week. She knew something too. Not all of it, but enough to guess. Her voice was calm, almost dismissive as she sighed into the phone. "You should have just lied," she said. "Why stir up trouble? You know how fragile things are right now. Keep the peace. Keep the peace." That phrase echoed in my head like a curse, as if keeping the peace was more important than keeping a pregnant woman safe from heartbreak, as if silence was easier than watching her be blindsided months down the road. But there was no peace in me. None. Every night I replayed the phone call in my head over and over. His voice begging, my refusal, the venom in his tone when he accused me of betrayal, and underneath it all, Emily's face, bright, glowing, full of hope. The guilt was unbearable. The anger even worse, because when your own blood asks you to help cover up betrayal, whose side do you take? The brother you grew up with, who once protected you from bullies on the playground, or the innocent woman carrying your future niece or nephew, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing over her head? I realized something that night, the night I said no. This wasn't just Daniel's betrayal. It was my crossroads, and whichever path I chose, there would be no turning back. For years, Daniel had been the golden child. Ask anyone in our family. He was the dependable one, the success story. He'd built a good career, married a sweet woman, and now, finally, after years of heartbreak, he and Emily were expecting a baby. People adored him. At family dinners, my mom would beam with pride when he walked in the door. "That's my son," she'd say, like he'd been handpicked by God to make her proud. He wore that image like a crown. Daniel, the responsible. Daniel the faithful. Daniel the man who could do no wrong. But after that midnight call, I couldn't unsee the cracks. The first family gathering after that night was at my parents' house. Emily showed up glowing, wearing a soft blue maternity dress that hugged her baby bump. She was radiant, smiling as she told everyone how excited she was to finally meet their little miracle. Daniel was right there beside her, hand on her lower back, nodding, smiling like he was the perfect husband. To everyone else, he looked like a man basking in fatherhood. But to me, he looked like a fraud. Every time I caught his eyes across the room, his smile faltered. His jaw clenched. He knew I was holding something that could shatter everything he was pretending to be. Emily laughed at something my mom said, rubbing her stomach, and Daniel leaned over, kissed her temple like the world's most loving husband. I had to look away, my stomach twisted with anger. Later that evening, as everyone was getting dessert, Daniel cornered me in the kitchen. His smile dropped the second we were alone. "You better not say a word," he hissed, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. I set down my plate. "You don't get to threaten me," he scoffed, leaning closer. "Threaten you? No, I'm warning you. You think you're some kind of hero? You're not. You're meddling in things that don't concern you. This is my marriage, not yours. Emily is practically family to me," I shot back. "And the baby," he cut me off with a sharp laugh. "Don't act like you care about my kid more than I do." The arrogance in his tone made my blood boil. He really believed he could cheat, manipulate, lie, and still walk away as the untouchable golden son. Before I could answer, Mom walked in with a tray of coffee cups. She froze for a second, sensing the tension, then sighed. "You two, can't you just get along for once? Honestly, it's exhausting." Daniel smirked, instantly slipping back into his charming mask. "We're fine, Mom, just talking." But as she walked out, he muttered under his breath, "Remember what I said. Keep the peace." That phrase again. Always that phrase. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel started pushing harder. He called me twice more, always late at night. The first time, he demanded to know if Emily had asked me anything. When I said no, he seemed almost smug, like he'd gotten away with something. The second time, he sounded impatient, telling me that if she did ever bring it up, I should do the right thing. The right thing. Funny how cheaters always twist morality, always try to convince you that their version of loyalty is the only one that matters. Meanwhile, Emily kept inviting me over for dinner. She wanted me around. She said she felt safe knowing family was close. especially with the baby coming soon. I'd sit there in their living room, watching her talk about the baby's kicks, about painting the nursery walls, about the tiny socks she'd knitted. Daniel would sit next to her, nodding, smiling, playing the part of the doting husband. And every time, I wanted to scream. Because while she looked at him with love, I looked at him and saw betrayal.
The pressure from Mom didn't stop either. One afternoon, she called me again, her tone sharper this time. "Why are you being so difficult? He's your brother. Brothers protect each other, always. That's how family works." I clenched the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Protect him from what, Mom? From the consequences of his own choices? From the fact that he's lying to Emily? Her voice softened, pleading now. "Sweetheart, Emily doesn't need stress right now. You'll just hurt her. Do you really want to be the one to cause that pain?" I closed my eyes. That was the trap, wasn't it? They were all trying to shift the weight of his betrayal onto my shoulders. If I stayed quiet, I was protecting. If I told the truth, I was hurting. But no one seemed to blame Daniel, the man who caused this in the first place. One night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house pressing in around me. I thought about Daniel, smug, confident, untouchable. I thought about Mom, begging me to lie. And I thought about Emily, knitting in her rocking chair, humming quietly as she planned for a future she didn't realize was already being stolen from her. The more I thought, the clearer it became. Daniel wasn't scared. He wasn't remorseful. He felt invincible. And why wouldn't he? He had everyone fooled. He had Mom covering for him. He had Emily wrapped around his finger. And he expected me to fall in line too. He thought I was just another pawn in his game, but I wasn't. That night, staring into the dark, I promised myself one thing. Daniel wasn't going to win this time. The days after that confrontation blurred together, but the weight in my chest never left. Every morning, I woke up thinking about it. Every night, I went to bed replaying it. I hadn't lied for Daniel. I hadn't given him the cover story he wanted. But I hadn't told Emily either. And that silence, it felt like a lie in itself. Emily called me one afternoon, her voice bubbling with joy. "Hey, do you want to come by for dinner? I made way too much lasagna, and Daniel insists I can't eat all of it by myself." Her laugh was so warm, so innocent. I forced a smile she couldn't see and said yes. When I arrived, the house smelled like garlic and baked cheese. Emily opened the door, her belly leading the way, her cheeks flushed with happiness. She hugged me tightly, pulling me into the warmth of their home. And there was Daniel, standing behind her with that same smug smile, the kind that twisted my stomach. To anyone else, he looked like a proud husband. But to me, he looked like a man daring me to break the illusion. Dinner was torture. Emily chattered about the nursery. "I painted the crib this week. Well, half of it before I got too tired. Daniel finished the rest for me. Didn't you, honey?" Daniel smiled, fork poised in midair. "Of course. Anything for you." He glanced at me as he said it, his eyes cold, a silent warning. I nodded stiffly, forcing a bite of lasagna down, even though my stomach turned. Then Emily looked at me, completely unaware of the storm raging between us. "You know," she said, "I trust Daniel completely. I don't even worry when he's out late because I know he's responsible. Not like those men you hear about." My chest tightened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in my throat like thorns. Instead, I smiled weakly. "Yeah, he's responsible." And just like that, I felt like I had lied. Not because I had spoken false words, but because my silence screamed louder than any truth. After dinner, Emily waddled off to bed, yawning, saying the baby had worn her out that day. Daniel stayed behind. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, that arrogant smirk plastered on his face. "See?" he whispered. "She doesn't suspect a thing. That's how it should stay." My jaw tightened. "You're disgusting," he chuckled, shaking his head. "No, I'm realistic. People cheat, people slip. Doesn't mean I don't love her. You're just too self-righteous to understand." I wanted to hit him. I wanted to wipe that smug expression off his face, but I clenched my fists and walked out.
because I knew if I stayed, I'd say something I couldn't take back. The following week, I tried to keep my distance. But Emily didn't make it easy. She called often, sometimes just to chat. One day, she said, "Daniel told me he's been at your place a few nights recently. Thank you for always keeping him company. It's so sweet of you both." My blood ran cold. He had already laid the groundwork. He was using me as his alibi, whether I agreed or not. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, we talk sometimes." She laughed. "I knew it. He always comes home so calm after spending time with you. I love that you two are close." Her voice carried nothing but love. And in that moment, I felt like the worst kind of coward because I hadn't said the words out loud, but I'd let her believe the lie. That night, guilt kept me awake again. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling until the shadows blurred. In my mind, I pictured Emily in the nursery, humming softly while folding baby clothes. I pictured Daniel slipping out at night, meeting Claire, whispering things in her ear that Emily would never hear. And then I pictured the moment when Emily would find out. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. When the truth came out, and it always did, who would she blame? Daniel for betraying her? Or me for letting her live in the dark? That question gnawed at me like acid. A few days later, I ran into Daniel again at Mom's house. He cornered me in the driveway before I could leave. "You're doing good," he said casually, like we were partners in some twisted project. "She believes it. She doesn't suspect a thing." I glared at him. "I never lied for you. Not once," he smirked. "You didn't have to. Silence does the job just as well." Those words, they burned into me. He was right. By saying nothing, I'd become his accomplice. And I hated myself for it. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat down at my desk with a notebook and pen and began writing. Every call, every late-night excuse, every time he'd tried to rope me into his lies. If I wasn't strong enough to tell Emily yet, then I needed to at least document the truth. Because one day I knew this would all come crashing down. And when it did, I wanted proof. Proof that I had never been his willing accomplice. Proof that I had chosen the truth, even if I couldn't speak it yet. Sleep had become a stranger. Nights stretched endlessly, my mind looping the same scenes like a broken film reel. Daniel's midnight confession, Emily's glowing smile, Mom's voice urging me to keep the peace. The guilt was suffocating. I wasn't the one sneaking around with an ex, but somehow I felt like I was the one betraying Emily. Every time she laughed, every time she touched her stomach and whispered about the baby, I felt like I was standing on quicksand because I knew and she didn't. One morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands shook as I flipped through the notebook where I'd been recording Daniel's lies. Dates, times, snippets of conversation, all of it in messy handwriting, proof of his betrayal. But staring at those pages only made the weight heavier. It wasn't enough to write it down. The truth was still rotting in my chest, poisoning me from the inside out. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. "Are you coming to dinner tonight?" she asked brightly, like everything was fine. I hesitated. "I don't know if I can." "Don't start. Daniel will be there, and I don't want any drama. Do you understand? Emily doesn't need stress right now." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Mom, she doesn't need lies either. She doesn't need you making things worse," she snapped. "Do you think you're helping by stirring the pot? If you really cared about Emily, you'd stay quiet." Stay quiet. It was the same script every time. When I hung up, I sat there staring at my notebook. Mom wanted silence. Daniel wanted silence. The whole family wanted silence. But silence was tearing me apart. That evening, against my better judgment, I went to dinner. Emily greeted me at the door, radiant in a soft yellow dress, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She said, "I'm so glad you came. The baby's been kicking like crazy today. Do you want to feel?" She grabbed my hand before I could answer and placed it gently on her belly. And there it was, a tiny kick, like the softest drum beat under my palm. I felt tears sting my eyes. This baby was real.
This family was real, and Daniel was risking it all for a fling with Claire. I smiled weakly. That's amazing, Em. She beamed, completely unaware of the storm raging just inches away.
Dinner was unbearable. Emily chatted about baby names, Mom laughed and teased about how spoiled the child would be, and Daniel played the role of perfect husband flawlessly. He refilled Emily's water, rubbed her shoulders when she winced, even leaned over to kiss her cheek in front of everyone. To them, he was the golden son. To me, he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Halfway through the meal, he caught my eye across the table. His smirk was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A silent taunt. You'll never say anything. You don't have the guts. After dinner, Emily waddled upstairs to rest, humming softly. Mom started cleaning the table. And Daniel? He cornered me on the porch. You're quiet tonight, he said casually, leaning against the railing. I crossed my arms. Maybe I'm tired of watching you lie. His smile didn't waver. Funny, from where I'm standing, you're lying just as much. Every time you sit at that table and smile at Emily, you're part of it. Don't forget that. My fists clenched. You think this is a game, don't you? You think you can just keep juggling both lives forever? He leaned closer, his voice dropping. And why not? She's happy. Claire's happy. Everyone's happy. Except you. You're the only one who can't keep your mouth shut. The arrogance in his tone snapped something inside me. Emily deserves better than you, I hissed. For the first time, his smile faltered, just a flicker. But then he laughed, cold and sharp. Oh, if you cared so much about Emily, you'd let her keep her happiness. Don't ruin it for her. Don't ruin it for the baby. The audacity of it left me speechless. He was cheating, and somehow I was the villain if I told the truth. That night, I drove home with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I replayed his words over and over. Don't ruin it for her. Don't ruin it for the baby. But wasn't he the one ruining it? Wasn't he the one tearing apart the very foundation Emily thought was unshakable? I pulled into my driveway and sat there in the dark, gripping the wheel until my hands ached. My chest heaved, the guilt pressing so hard I thought I might suffocate. And for the first time, I whispered the words out loud. I can't do this anymore. That week, the cracks in me started to show. At work, I couldn't focus. At home, I paced the floors, restless. My friends asked if I was okay, but how could I explain? How could I tell them that my brother's betrayal had turned me into a prisoner of silence? The breaking point came one night when Emily called again. Hey, she said sweetly, Daniel mentioned he might stop by Claire's tomorrow. Oh, wait, no. I mean your place. I'm so tired. I keep mixing things up. She laughed softly, not realizing what she'd just said. My heart froze. Claire's name. He had slipped, or maybe Emily had overheard something she wasn't supposed to. I forced a shaky laugh. Yeah, maybe you just misheard. But when I hung up, I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. This was it. The rope was fraying. The lies were bleeding into the open. And I realized something chilling. If I didn't tell Emily soon, she was going to find out another way. And when she did, she'd know I had stayed silent. And that silence, that would be my betrayal. The night Emily accidentally slipped Claire's name, something inside me shifted. Until then, I'd been living in limbo, trapped between silence and betrayal, between protecting Emily and keeping my family from exploding. But that one slip, that one mistake, made the danger real. Daniel wasn't just playing games anymore. His two lives were bleeding into each other, and when that happened, secrets had a way of detonating all on their own. I realized then that if I didn't take control, the truth would come crashing down in the ugliest way possible. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. At work, I found myself staring at my computer screen, my mind running endless loops of what-ifs. What if Emily confronted me directly? What if she discovered the truth by accident? What if Daniel twisted everything and made me look like the liar who stayed silent too long? I couldn't let that happen.
That's when I pulled out the notebook again. The pages were filled with scribbles, dates, times, pieces of conversations with Daniel, but now I looked at it differently. This wasn't just a guilty diary. This was evidence, and evidence could become a weapon.
I started organizing everything. I wrote down every phone call, word for word, replaying them in my mind until I could remember his exact phrasing. I noted the nights he claimed to be with me, even when he wasn't. I highlighted the moment Emily mentioned Claire's name. Every detail mattered. And as I did it, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Daniel thought he had me cornered, but he was wrong. If he wanted silence, I would give him something louder. The next step came almost naturally. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before, watching Daniel's movements, asking Emily innocent questions that gave me more information than she realized she was giving. One night over dinner, she mentioned casually, "Daniel's been working late a lot. He says he's at the office, but sometimes I hear music on the background when he calls. Doesn't sound like his office to me." I nodded sympathetically, hiding the rush of anger burning inside me. Another crack. Another thread unraveling. I wrote it all down later that night. But this wasn't just about recording lies. This was about timing. Revealing the truth at the wrong moment could be catastrophic. Emily was 7 months pregnant. Too much stress could harm her or the baby. The fallout had to be controlled, not chaotic. So I waited. I watched. I planned. Every time Daniel smirched at me across the dinner table, every time he whispered his warnings about keeping the peace, I smiled back just enough to keep him complacent, because that's what he didn't know. His arrogance was my camouflage. He thought I was still torn, still stuck in guilt, but in reality, I was sharpening the knife of truth. The hardest part was pretending with Emily. She kept calling, kept inviting me over, kept sharing her dreams for the baby's future. I'd sit beside her on the couch while she held up tiny onesies, asking which color I liked better. And every time, I nodded, smiled, pretended to be present, while my insides burned with the knowledge of what Daniel was doing behind her back. But I also listened carefully. She was beginning to notice things, the late nights, the vague excuses, the way Daniel sometimes snapped at her over nothing. Her instincts were catching on, even if her heart wasn't ready to believe it. And that's when I knew the plan didn't have to be me blindsiding her with the truth. The plan could be letting her reach the edge herself, then giving her the final push. I tested this theory one evening when Emily invited me over again. She handed me a cup of tea and sighed. "You know, sometimes I feel like Daniel is distracted, like his mind is somewhere else. Do you think it's just the stress of the baby?" Her eyes searched mine, vulnerable, aching for reassurance. My heart twisted. I wanted to tell her everything, but instead, I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Emily, you know I'd never lie to you. If something ever seemed off, I'd tell you, always." She smiled faintly, reaching for my hand. "I know, that's why I trust you." The guilt nearly crushed me, but her words also gave me clarity. Because trust wasn't just a burden, it was a weapon, and I would use it, not to betray her, but to protect her from the man who already had. By the end of that week, my plan was solidifying. Step 1, keep documenting everything. Step 2, wait for Daniel to slip again, and he would. Step 3, when the moment was right, give Emily the truth in a way she couldn't deny. With proof so clear, Daniel couldn't twist it against me. I didn't know when the moment would come, but I could feel it drawing closer. One night, as I closed my notebook, I whispered to myself, this isn't just about revenge. It's about justice. For Emily, for the baby, for the truth. And for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly because I finally had a plan. By the time the next week rolled around, my notebook had become more than just scribbles. It was a map, a record of every lie, every excuse, every thread of deception Daniel thought he was weaving so perfectly. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized he wasn't as careful as he thought. I began paying closer attention to the little things, the way he slipped up in conversation, the inconsistencies in his excuses, the details that didn't match. At family dinner, Emily mentioned that Daniel had said he was working late at the office, but later that same evening, Daniel told Mom he'd been out with me. 2 different stories, 1 truth. I didn't point it out, not yet. I just wrote it down, adding it to the growing list of cracks in his perfect facade. Daniel still carried himself with that same smug arrogance, smiling across the table like nothing was wrong. But I noticed something he probably didn't. His overconfidence was making him sloppy. He'd gotten comfortable, too comfortable. And that was exactly what I needed. One afternoon, Emily invited me to go baby shopping with her. She wanted a second opinion on strollers. We walked through aisles of car seats, onesies, and bottles, her face lighting up at every tiny outfit. She held up a soft yellow sleeper covered in ducks. "Isn't this adorable?" I smiled. "It's perfect." She giggled, placing it in the cart. But then, almost as an afterthought, she sighed. "Daniel's been distracted again. Last night he came home late, and when I asked where he was, he got defensive. He said he was with you, but..." She looked at me carefully. "You didn't mention anything." My heart skipped. This was it, the trap tightening on its own. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my expression neutral. Sometimes he swings by, sometimes he doesn't. He doesn't always tell me when he's planning to. She nodded slowly, as if that explanation made sense, but I saw it. The flicker of doubt in her eyes, and that flicker was the opening I needed.
That night, I sat at my desk staring at my notebook. Daniel thought he was in control, but he wasn't. Not anymore. He didn't know it, but every time he lied, every time he smirked at me, every time he used me as his cover, he was giving me more ammunition, and I wasn't wasting a single bullet. The trap had to be subtle. If I came at him head on, he'd twist it, manipulate it, make me the villain. He'd done it before, and he'd do it again. No, this time, I had to let him hang himself with his own rope. So I started asking small, seemingly innocent questions. At dinner one night, I leaned back casually and asked, "So, Daniel, how's work been? Long nights again?" He hesitated for just a second before flashing his usual grin. "Yeah, lots of late projects. You know how it is." But later, when Emily mentioned that he'd told her he was at my house that same night, I simply smiled and said, maybe he mixed up the days. I didn't deny, I didn't confirm, I just let the seed of doubt grow. The brilliance of the trap wasn't in confrontation, it was in patience. I wasn't the one who needed to expose him. He was going to expose himself.
The turning point came when Emily invited me over one evening while Daniel was out. She brewed tea, her hands absent-mindedly rubbing her belly. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally, her voice soft but heavy. "Of course." She hesitated, then looked me straight in the eye. "Do you think Daniel is hiding something from me?" The air left my lungs. This was the moment, the line between silence and truth. I leaned forward slowly. "Emily, if you feel something is wrong, it's because something probably is." Her eyes welled with tears. I want to trust him. I do trust him. But lately, it's like I don't know where he really is anymore. I took a deep breath. "You don't have to take my word for it. Just pay attention. Watch his stories, his excuses, the details. They won't add up." She nodded, biting her lip, her hand tightening around her teacup. And in that moment, I knew the trap was set. Because once trust cracks, it doesn't heal, it only fractures further. Meanwhile, Daniel kept feeding me his arrogance. One night, he called again, his voice thick with irritation. "Why do you keep acting weird around Emily? She's starting to ask questions." I smirked into the phone. "Maybe you're just getting sloppy." He barked a laugh. "Please, she'll never know. She's too naive. And as long as you keep your mouth shut, I've got nothing to worry about." But he was wrong. He already had everything to worry about because the trap wasn't just set, it was closing. I didn't need to scream the truth. I didn't need to explode in front of everyone. All I needed was patience. All I needed was Daniel's own arrogance. And soon, Emily herself would pull the thread that unraveled his entire life. The first crack came sooner than I expected. It was a Tuesday evening when Emily called me, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "Can you come over?" she asked quietly. Please. I didn't even hesitate. Within 20 minutes, I was at their house, heart pounding as I knocked on the door. Emily opened it slowly, her eyes red and swollen, cheeks streaked with tears. She didn't even say hello, just stepped aside, letting me in. On the coffee table in the living room sat Daniel's phone, unlocked, open to a text message. The words glared back at me like fire. Claire, I miss last night already. When can I see you again? My stomach flipped. Emily's voice was small, breaking as she spoke. He left his phone in the kitchen when he went upstairs to shower. I wasn't snooping. It just lit up. Her hands shook as she gestured toward it. He told me he was at the office last night, but this, she couldn't finish. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breathing shallow. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. Emily, I told you before, if something feels wrong, it's because it is. Her eyes brimmed again. So he's been lying. This whole time? I couldn't bring myself to nod, but my silence was enough. When Daniel came downstairs 10 minutes later, freshly showered, Emily had already wiped her tears. She sat on the couch, phone in hand, her face unreadable. Who's Claire? She asked flatly. The color drained from his face. For a split second, pure panic flashed in his eyes. But then, just as quickly, he slipped the mask back on. Claire, she's just an old friend. I told you about her before. Emily's voice didn't rise. It didn't break. It was calm, terrifyingly calm. And what did you do with her last night while I sat here alone? Daniel stammered, his carefully polished lies unraveling. It wasn't like that. We just talked, that's all. Emily stood, her belly prominent, her hands trembling as she pointed toward the door. Get out. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. And Emily crumpled. She sank onto the couch, sobbing into her hands, whispering over and over, "How could he do this to me? How could he do this now?" I sat beside her, rubbing her back, my own anger boiling. This was it, the first domino. And I knew, once it tipped, there was no stopping the chain reaction. The fallout came fast. The next day, Mom called me, furious. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Daniel said you filled her head with lies." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I didn't fill her head with anything. His own phone did that. Why couldn't you just let it go?" she cried. "She's pregnant, for God's sake. Do you know how much stress this could cause the baby?" My voice shook with fury. "And whose fault is that? Mine, or the man who's been sneaking around behind his pregnant wife's back?" There was silence on the other end. Then finally, Mom muttered, "You've always been jealous of him. That's what this is about. Jealous." The word stung, not because it was true, but because it was the weapon she always used when she couldn't defend Daniel's actions. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That evening, Daniel showed up at my apartment. He didn't knock politely. He pounded on the door until I opened it. The second I did, he shoved me back, his face twisted in rage. "You just couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you?" he snarled. I shoved him off, my own anger matching his. "Don't blame me. Blame your own damn phone. You're sloppy, Daniel. You always were." His chest heaved as he glared at me. "You think you've won? You think you've ruined me? Emily will forgive me. She always does. And when she does, you'll be the one left out." I stared at him, my voice cold. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me. This is about her and the baby, and whether they deserve to live under a roof built on lies." For the first time, he didn't have a quick retort. He just stood there, fists clenched, jaw tight, eyes burning with hatred, and then he spat at the floor, turned, and stormed out. But I knew something he didn't. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Daniel tried everything to claw his way back into control. He sent Emily flowers. He wrote her long texts about how much he loved her. He begged her to believe that Claire was just a friend. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast.
Emily began asking me questions. Quiet ones, careful ones. What did Daniel say to you that night he was out late? Did you ever notice him acting strange? Do you think he really loves me? And each time I answered carefully. Not lies, but not blunt truths either. Just enough to keep her eyes open, to keep her listening to her instincts. Because this wasn't about me shattering her world in one blow. This was about letting Daniel destroy himself, piece by piece, and he was doing it beautifully. One evening, Emily told me Daniel had promised he was working late again, but when she called the office, no one picked up. The next morning, she found a receipt in his jacket pocket from a restaurant across town. She didn't confront him, not yet. She just tucked it into a drawer, her eyes growing colder by the day. The trap wasn't just closing anymore. The first domino had fallen, and now the rest were tumbling one by one. And as I watched it unfold, I realized something chilling. Revenge wasn't about shouting the truth. It wasn't about exposing him with a dramatic reveal. It was about patience. It was about silence. It was about letting the truth unravel at its own pace until the liar was crushed under the weight of his own deceit. The air in the house that night was different, heavy, charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. Emily had called me earlier in the day, her voice calm, too calm. "We're having dinner tonight. You should come." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. She wasn't inviting me as family. She was inviting me as witness. When I arrived, Emily was already at the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore no makeup, no smile, no glow. She looked exhausted, like someone who'd cried every tear she had, but still found the strength to keep going. Daniel sat across from her, pretending everything was fine. He grinned when I walked in, the same false grin he always wore when he thought he still had the upper hand. "Look who decided to show up," he said lightly, as if the last week hadn't been a battlefield. But Emily didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't move. She told me, "Sit," quietly. I obeyed, my chest tight, my pulse hammering. Dinner was silent, forks scraping against plates, the faint hum of the refrigerator, nothing else. Daniel kept glancing at Emily, trying to charm her with small talk. "This roast is amazing, babe. You really outdid yourself." She didn't respond. Finally, she set her fork down, the sound sharp in the quiet room. She looked straight at Daniel, her voice steady. "Where were you last Thursday?" Daniel froze for only a fraction of a second before recovering. "I told you, I was at the office late." Emily's hand reached under the table. She pulled out a folded receipt and placed it in front of him. A restaurant receipt, 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine. His face went pale. "I called your office that night. No one answered, and then I found this. So I'll ask again, Daniel, where were you?" For the first time, Daniel's mask slipped. He stammered, his usual smooth excuses faltering. It's not what you think. Claire was she needed someone to talk to. That's all." Emily leaned back in her chair, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "She texted you, Daniel. I saw it. I missed last night already. When can I see you again?" That doesn't sound like someone who just needed to talk. Her voice broke slightly, but her eyes never left his. Daniel turned to me then, desperation flickering in his eyes. Tell her I was with you." It was the moment, the exact moment I had been waiting for. I looked at Emily, then back at him. Slowly, deliberately, I shook my head. "No, Daniel, I won't lie for you."
The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's eyes closed for a moment, as if she were absorbing the final blow. When she opened them, her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of finality. "Get out." Daniel's face twisted in panic. "Emily, please, you don't understand. I didn't mean anything. I love you. I love our baby. Don't do this." Emily stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You loved her. Well, I sat here carrying your child. You loved her." Her voice cracked, but she didn't waver. "I will not raise my baby in a house built on lies." Daniel lunged toward her, reaching for her hands, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me," she whispered. And then she turned away, walking down the hall to the bedroom, leaving him standing there with his hands hanging uselessly in the air. He turned to me, fury blazing in his eyes. "This is your fault. You poisoned her. You ruined everything." I stood, my heart pounding,
my voice low but steady. "No, Daniel, you did this. You betrayed her. You betrayed your child. All I did was refuse to clean up your mess." For a moment, he looked like he might hit me. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened, his body trembling with rage. But then, like the coward he truly was, he stormed out instead, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. Emily emerged a few minutes later, her eyes puffy but her face resolute. She sat back down, her hands resting protectively on her belly. "Thank you," she whispered. My throat tightened. "I'm sorry it had to be this way." She shook her head. "No, I needed to see it for myself, and now I have." There was no triumph in her voice, no gloating, just heartbreak. But beneath it, I heard something else too, strength. Because Emily wasn't broken, not anymore. She was done being deceived.
That night was the end of Daniel's charade. Word spread quickly through the family. Daniel tried to twist the story to make himself the victim, but the evidence was too strong. The texts, the receipts, my refusal to lie. Mom called again. This time in tears. "Why couldn't you just let it go? He's your brother." My voice was cold, final. He stopped being my brother the moment he asked me to betray her, and I hung up. Daniel moved out of the house within a week. Emily filed for separation shortly after. He tried to win her back, more flowers, more apologies, more empty promises, but the damage was done. The mask had shattered, and no amount of glue could put it back together. For the first time, Daniel wasn't the golden child. He wasn't the perfect husband, the dependable son. He was just a man who'd gambled with everything and lost. And I hadn't shouted. I hadn't raged. I had simply refused to lie. And that refusal had been the sharpest revenge of all. The night Daniel stormed out of his house, I thought the worst was over. The truth was out, Emily had confronted him, and I had finally refused to be his shield. But I underestimated how deep the cracks would go. Because once betrayal is exposed, it doesn't just break a marriage, it breaks everything around it. The first wave of fallout hit the very next morning. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Missed calls from mom, texts from dad, even a couple of messages from cousins who normally never involved themselves in family drama. Everyone had heard. And as I expected, Daniel was already spinning the story. She's exaggerating. It wasn't really cheating. I just needed space before the baby came. Each excuse made my blood boil. But what hurt most was how easily some of them believed him. That evening, Mom called again. Her voice was thick with tears. "You should have kept quiet," she sobbed. "Do you realize what you've done to this family? Your brother is broken. Emily is devastated. We're all in pieces." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "No, Mom. Daniel did this. He cheated. He lied. I didn't destroy this family. He did." But she wouldn't hear it. Families have problems. You don't air them out. You protect each other. That's what family means. Her words cut deep, but not because they were true, because they revealed just how blind she still was. Family meant protection, yes, but protection for the innocent, not the guilty. Meanwhile, Emily was a storm of quiet strength. She didn't scream, she didn't break dishes or throw tantrums. She simply stopped answering Daniel's calls, stopped engaging with his endless apologies, stopped pretending she believed his lies. Instead, she focused on the baby. She spent her days in the nursery, folding tiny clothes, arranging bottles, humming softly to herself. I visited often, helping where I could, installing shelves, painting walls, carrying the things she couldn't. Sometimes she cried, silent tears streaming down her cheeks as she worked. Other times she was stone-faced, her jaw tight, her eyes sharp. And in those moments, I realized something. She wasn't just surviving, she was transforming. Daniel, on the other hand, unraveled quickly. At first, he tried to win Emily back. Flowers, gifts, long text messages full of promises he'd never keep. When that didn't work, he shifted tactics. Anger, guilt, manipulation. You're tearing this family apart. You're going to raise our child without a father. You're listening to them more than me, your husband. But Emily never wavered. Each unanswered call, each ignored message chipped away at him. The man who once thought he was untouchable now sounded desperate, unhinged. The wider family began to split into factions. Mom defended Daniel endlessly, insisting Emily was overreacting, that he just made a mistake. Dad stayed quieter, but urged me to let it go for the sake of peace. Some cousins whispered support for Emily, while others avoided the topic entirely, uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. At gatherings, the air was thick with tension. Conversations turned sharp, voices raised, accusations thrown like knives, and always at the center of it was Daniel, still pretending he was the victim, still trying to drag everyone down with him.
One Sunday dinner turned into a battlefield. Mom sat at the head of the table, her lips tight, her eyes darting between me and Daniel. "You should apologize," she said firmly. I frowned. "Apologize? For what?" "For turning your back on your brother," she snapped. Daniel smirked from across the table. "See? Even Mom knows you betrayed me." The words hit like gasoline on a fire. My fists clenched, my voice rising before I could stop it. "I betrayed you? No, Daniel. You betrayed Emily. You betrayed your unborn child. You betrayed every ounce of trust anyone ever had in you. Don't you dare put this on me." The table went silent. Emily, sitting beside me, placed her hand over mine, her eyes wet but steady. And in that silence, something shifted, because for the first time, some of them saw the truth. They saw Daniel not as the golden son, but as the liar he had become. The weeks that followed were messy. Emily filed for legal separation, citing infidelity. Daniel fought it at first, throwing accusations and trying to paint her as emotional and irrational. But the evidence, the texts, the receipts, the lies, was undeniable. I provided what I had written in my notebook when Emily's lawyer asked. Every detail, every date, every discrepancy. My messy scribbles turned into sharp blades in court. And Daniel, he crumbled under them. Watching him lose control wasn't triumphant, it was tragic. This was my brother, the boy I played with in the backyard, the teenager who used to defend me from bullies, the man I once admired. But now, he was unrecognizable, a stranger, drowning in lies, dragging everyone else down with him. Through it all, Emily stood tall. She cried. Yes, she mourned the life she thought she had, but she never wavered in her decision. "I won't raise my child in a house built on betrayal," she told me one night, her voice steady. "He can still be a father if he chooses, but he'll never be my husband again." I felt a surge of respect so strong it nearly knocked me over. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was protecting her baby from growing up in a home poisoned by deceit. By the time the separation papers were finalized, the family was in ruins. Mom barely spoke to me anymore. Daniel refused to look me in the eye. Dad kept trying to mend the pieces, but it was useless. And yet, despite the wreckage, I felt lighter, because for the first time, the truth wasn't buried. It was out, raw, brutal, unforgiving. And Daniel, once the golden son, was left to choke on the consequences he created. The house felt quieter after Daniel left for good. No more late-night phone calls begging me to lie, no more fake smiles across the dinner table, no more heavy silence pressing down on me every time Emily laughed, unaware of the storm brewing behind her back. The truth was out, and with it came silence of a different kind. Not heavy, not suffocating, just still. But stillness isn't the same as peace. I spent a long time thinking about everything that had happened. The night Daniel first called me, frantic and desperate, the way Emily glowed with hope, knitting socks for a baby she believed was being born into a safe home, the weight of silence, the notebook full of scribbles, the confrontation at the dinner table, and the fallout. Mom's tears, Dad's silence, the family torn down the middle. It all sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't put down. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't end with fireworks. It ends with ashes. And sometimes, those ashes choke you just as much as they choked the one who deserved them. I saw Daniel a few weeks after the separation was finalized. He looked smaller somehow.
like the arrogance had been carved out of him, leaving only emptiness. We crossed paths outside of Dad's house. He wouldn't look at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes bloodshot. "You happy now?" he muttered, his voice low, bitter. I stood there in the fading light, studying him, the brother I once looked up to, the man I once admired, the golden son who had turned to rust before my eyes. "I didn't do this," I said quietly. "You did." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, regret, but just as quickly it vanished, replaced by the same hollow glare. He walked away without another word, and just like that, I knew our relationship was over. Not just strained, not just cracked, over.
Emily, on the other hand, grew stronger by the day. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl 3 weeks later. I still remember the moment I held my niece for the first time. Tiny, fragile, her little fingers curling around mine. Emily smiled weakly from her hospital bed, tears in her eyes. She's gonna know love, real love, the kind that never lies. I squeezed her hand. She already does. She has you. And in that moment, I realized the revenge hadn't just been about exposing Daniel. It had been about protecting her, protecting the child, protecting the future from being poisoned by his lies. The wider family never fully healed. Mom still blamed me. In her eyes, I'd chosen sides, broken loyalty, turned against my own blood. But I'd stopped caring what she thought, because loyalty isn't about shielding someone from the consequences of their own actions. It's about standing with the people who deserve it. And Daniel didn't deserve it. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the weight of it all, about how close I came to caving, to lying, to burying the truth so deep it might never have surfaced. But then I think of Emily's face when she finally saw the receipt, the text messages, the undeniable evidence. I think of the strength in her voice when she told Daniel to leave. And I think of my niece, innocent, pure, born into truth instead of lies. And I know I made the right choice. Revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like quiet truth. Sometimes it looks like refusing to play along. Sometimes it looks like walking away, letting a liar choke on his own web of deceit. That was my revenge. Not dramatic, not loud, just refusing to be part of the lie. And in the end, that was enough. As I look back now, one thing is clear. Blood isn't always thicker. Family isn't defined by who you share DNA with. It's defined by trust, by love, by honesty. Daniel may be my brother by blood, but Emily, my niece, they are my family by choice, by truth, by loyalty that actually means something. And that, in the end, is what matters. So if you're listening to this, wondering what you'd do in my place, remember this: silence can be betrayal too. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply choosing not to be part of someone else's lie. When betrayal comes from blood, it cuts the deepest. But truth is the only revenge that lasts. If this story gave you goosebumps, smash that like button, drop your own story of betrayal in the comments, and subscribe, because the next one is even darker.